Hey everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. This is a very, very special episode. I'm excited to finally we get to bring this to you. I'm here with Will. We've got Matt and we've got Jex, the four of us together again. Hey guys.
Hi.
Let's roll. Yeah. We are going back 30 years, believe it or not. 1991 should not be 30 years ago, but it is. And we submitted, Matt, our personal lists of what we thought the top albums of 1991 were. And he compiled a master list of the top 20, plus a few honorable mentions. And I'll let Matt take it from here because he learned quite a few things while doing that compiling.
Yeah, so we actually started with a fairly sizable list of 41 albums. I have the entire list in front of me, and I have everybody's rankings too. We're going to start at number 20, and I'm going to go through each number, and I'm going to let, because this is actually going to be a surprise. They have no idea the ranking. So I'll tell you who ranked each album the highest, and they can start talking from there. And then if anyone else wants to add anything, we're good to go. So at number 20, just squeaking into our top 20 is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers with Into the Great Wide Open. Jax, you rated this at number 14.
Yeah, well, originally we had a list of 15 titles each, right? And that one squeaked on because it's funny, it's not an album I'm overly familiar with. Like, I haven't heard it that many times. But Tom Petty is just such a great singer-songwriter, so it left a mark. Like, even though I'm not overly familiar with it, I really like it a lot. And, you know, the big hits on here were Learning to Fly and Into the Great Wide Open. And again, I wasn't very old in 91. But I still have memories of seeing that video Into the Great Wide Open on Much Music. So I don't know. I guess it's a lot of nostalgia, but I think it's a great album.
Awesome. So this was Tom Petty's second album that he recorded with Jeff Lynne as producer. The previous one was really popular. Had oh my gosh, having a complete
Free Falling.
Yeah, Free Falling.
Yeah, Full Moon Fever. It was a huge album for him.
Yeah, so this actual album, Into the Great Wide Open, sounds fairly familiar to that record. It didn't do quite as well, but they really tried to promote it. There was like 7 singles from this album. It did fairly well in Canada, went to number 4, was a number 13 on the US Billboard. Not my favorite.
I wouldn't have thought that it did anywhere near as well as Full Moon Fever, because near as I can tell, Learning to Fly was the big hit off of it.
Yeah.
And then the title song. And I honestly, those are the only songs I know from that album.
Yeah. Like I said, there were 7 singles. So they really obviously tried to promote that one heavily, and it just didn't take off. Maybe it could have been to do with the musical climate then. Not sure. Oh, I know that that was his last record with MCA, and the next one that he would do, we won't really get into it, but that's actually my favorite Tom Petty record, the one that came afterwards. So maybe we'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe because it was his last MCA, maybe they didn't promote it as much.
Could be. Yeah.
Could have loved it.
Yeah. So the next one, number 19, is by a band we're all familiar with here in Canada, Rush, Roll the Bones. And actually, not surprisingly, Tim rated this as his top 10. So just squeaked into Tim's top 10.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I do have it on vinyl here. Will's got the CD. This came out in September of 1991, and I remember this is pre-internet again. Just want to show you what the record itself looks like. It's kind of cool. What I remember about this is I didn't know it was coming out. So I went into a store, and it wasn't even a music store. It was just a regular like convenience store that sold cassettes, and they had cassettes on like the dash, not the dash, but the counter. And they had some new releases out, and there was a whole bunch of these Roll the Bones cassettes. I'm like, Rush have a new album? And like I said, it's not my favorite. It was the second album that was produced by Rupert Hines. So And I mean, he sadly passed away last year, but I don't think he was the best producer for them. It's a fairly timid, clattery kind of production. Martin Popoff says it sounds like they're playing inside of a matchbox, but it did really well for them. They're in the States, their previous, like Hold Your Fire and Presto just went gold, which is, you know, good, but their previous albums had gone platinum. This went platinum for them. So it did sell a little bit better than their previous. The title song was the only video released from it, surprisingly enough. And it became a concert staple. The opening track, Dreamline, was a concert staple for them. It had Ghost of a Chance, which was got some radio play, as did the song called Bravado. And I don't know, it's Rush, a band I think was incapable of doing a clunker of an album, but it's just not one of my favorites. So you might be surprised that I did rank it fairly low, but there you go.
Jex or Will?
I had this one ranked 14 or 15 maybe.
Yep, 14.
But this is Moving Pictures, probably in my top 3 Rush albums after that. So I still like it. I like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and Will's actually got a copy of this that I've never seen before because I bought the CD when it first came out. He's got what appears to be a remastered copy. So that's pretty cool.
Go ahead, Jex.
So I had to re-listen to this one a couple of days ago in preparation because when it comes to Rush, anything after Moving Pictures, I'm less familiar with. And that's not because I think they're bad albums. Far from it. It's just I've always put so much focus on the earlier discography. I love that stuff, the 70s Rush, and you know, especially Moving Pictures is one of my top albums. So the rest of the stuff I'm less familiar with. So listening to it again, I enjoyed it for what it is. It's different. Tim mentioned the production. You could tell it's kind of a different sound for Rush, but I still liked it for what it is. You have a really solid opener. I'm looking at the track listing here. Dreamline, I really enjoyed. The title track, World of Bones, I liked as well. One of my favorites on here, actually, funnily enough, is it's an instrumental called, and get this title, Where's My Thing, Part 4, Gangster of Boats Trilogy. And apparently there is no trilogy. There is no such trilogy.
You can't have part 4 of a trilogy. So yeah, that's
what I mean. They're just having fun, and that's one of the things I love about Rush. They don't take themselves too seriously. They're having fun. They have a sense of humor. And that instrumental is really good. It's right up there with YYZ, in my humble opinion. So yeah, I like World of Bones. Again, it's not one of their top albums, but it is good for what it is.
I have to admit something terrible. I'm the reason that this album didn't make it into our top 10. I rated this at number 36. And that's because I wasn't familiar with it up until 2 days ago. I started listening to it, and I've listened to it 3 times, and I actually like the album now. Who knew? All right, so moving into number 18 is The Cult with Ceremony. And not surprisingly, I actually rated this one the highest out of everyone. You guys were in the 20s with this one, low 20s. Actually, Tim rated number 21. For me, actually, well, let's just show. So there's the CD. I actually rated this number 3. This is my 3rd favorite album of 1991. So obviously, I'm a huge Cult fan. So give me 1 second here. Got the vinyl. That vinyl record has a photo of a boy who was about 9 years old. He was from I think it was North Dakota, and his family filed a lawsuit against the Cult. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that people kind of remember most about this album, the $61 million lawsuit that his family put against the Cult. Incidentally, that actually didn't really go anywhere. As it turns out, the Cult had properly licensed that image from the photographer, and so they didn't actually get sued for $61 million. But yeah, I really love the album. It was kind of a bit of a turmoil time for the band. They lost their bassist, Jamie Stewart, who'd been with them for quite a long time.
Curry plays the drum. Does he play the drums on that album too? Like I know he did on.
Yeah, that's right. Mick Curry and Charlie Drayton played the bass. But actually, when you see, it's one of those things where somebody played on the album, but then Michael Lee, who worked with Page and Plant,
Yeah.
was the actual guy who played the drums in the videos and that sort of thing. So yeah, I love the album. I've got actually quite a few singles. This is the one for Wild Hearted Son.
It's a great song.
Yeah. And Heart of Soul. I actually have like 3 different versions of that single. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I
Like
love
them
it.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Wild Hearted Son's a great song. It's funny because, you know, I think it was the changing of the guard musically in some cases, because just like Tom Petty, I mean, the Cult had come off 2 really successful, well, really 3 if you count Love, but
Yep.
Electric and Sonic Temple were both platinum albums, and this isn't that different from Sonic Temple, is it? Really? I mean, sound-wise.
Yeah, it's got a few more, a little bit more variety, and not to talk about it too much longer, but they actually had intended to work with Bob Rock again, who did the Sonic Temple record, but we're going to be talking about a few other albums later that actually Bob Rock decided to work on, some other bigger bands and some smaller projects. But yeah, so they ended up using a guy, I think his name's Tommy Funderburk, as the producer, or so yeah.
Tommy Funderburk, I mean, that's kind of an inside joke. He's like a studio guy, and his name pops up different places. So anyway. All right.
I can't add anything. I've never heard the album, so unless I've heard singles, not knowing is the Cult, but I'll have to check it out.
All right. So number 17 is Brittany Fox with Bite Down Hard. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have Will talk about this one. This sneaked into Will's top 10.
I put this in my top 10 and was surprised. This is one of the ones I was surprised that made the top 20. So this was released March 27th. They changed singers. Dean Davidson parted the band and Tommy Paris came in to sing. It's probably my favorite album from them. It's quite a bit heavier. There's nothing that's too catchy in terms of like a big single, but it is just straight ahead hard rock. Michael Kelly Smith plays guitar on this album and he kills it. He was part of Cinderella.
I think
for a little bit.
I think a lot of the guys in this band were in Cinderella.
Yeah, earlier in the band.
Yeah,
by this album, a few of them left, but they was still part of the Cinderella ripoff in a way.
And I'm looking around and I don't see it.
I don't have it. No.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, actually, that album cover is interesting. And they actually used a Brittany Powell as the cover model on the Brittany Fox album, which I thought was kind of funny.
I have heard this album. It's I really didn't like the first 2 Brittany Fox albums at all, because I am a Cinderella fan, and I always viewed them as a poor man's Cinderella, right down to the fact that their original singer, Dizzy Dean Davidson, sounded like he was copying Tom Kiefer every time he opened his mouth. And they were a 4-piece band, the same lineup, and I just, to me, they were just copying Cinderella note for note. So Tommy Paris, great singer, doesn't really sound anything like Dean Davidson. Powerful vocalist. I think the single off of this album was a song called Louder. But I mean, this came out in the fall of 1991. So there was no way this was going to do well. There just was no way. Why is that, Matt?
I first heard it lately, actually, because of Will. We were talking, and I was mentioning how I got the Brittany Fox debut on cassette, and then he recommended this one. So I didn't listen to the whole thing. I just started maybe 3 or 4 songs in, but I really like what I heard. So I'm going to have to listen to the whole thing eventually because it's really good.
I actually checked it out. I was just talking to Jex earlier, but I listened to another album that Jex really likes, and I listened to this Brittany Fox album twice today in honor of Will, and I like some of the tunes. I'll just give you a couple quick notes and we'll move on, but the people that produced this are John Purdell and Dwayne Barron, who actually produced a really high-ranking album that we're going to be talking about a little later. This has got a few guest appearances from Zakk Wylde. I think he does a guitar solo on the first song. It's got Ricky Rocket from Poison does a little percussion drum stuff on here. And I actually liked, I had it on the headphones, and I liked, it sort of starts off, you can hear this woman walking in heels, and then like a gunshot, and kicks off the album. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. It's not really my thing, but I think I do prefer this singer over their original singer.
Yeah.
Moving on to number 16. Speaking of grunge, Pearl Jam's 10, their debut album from August 27th, 1991. Jex just beat me out on this one. He rated it number 12 and I rated it number 13.
Oh, there you go. Close.
Jex, you want to talk about Pearl Jam 10?
Yeah. I mean, this to me is like, if you're not into grunge, this is like the ungrungiest of grunge albums, probably, because it's so close to rock. Like if you put this next to Nirvana, it doesn't sound the same. It doesn't. I much prefer Pearl Jam as opposed to Nirvana. But I think that's probably Eddie Vedder. He's such a great vocalist, powerful voice. The musicianship is great. The hits on here were really good. Once and Even Flow, which is a song that comes on the radio often, and I don't get tired of it. Jeremy was another big hit. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's well done. It's well done. For me, I consider it a good rock album.
Yeah. Apparently it was
believe it or not. No, sorry. Believe it or not, I used to have this CD. And Jex is absolutely right. It's the most ungrunge sounding. It's got a great production on it. Fantastic guitar solos. Stone Gossard and his name is escaping me. He's
Mike
played on
McCready.
Aces. Mike McCready, yeah. Great guitar playing, great drumming. They were a good band, and I really don't like much of what they did after that, but I don't really have much of a problem with 10. I don't have it anymore, but if I was, if a Seattle album I must listen to but from that era, I actually don't mind 10.
Took about a year for this one to take off. Of course, it came out in 1991, but I still associate it with more like 1992. It really took almost a year before it hit the top 10 on the Billboard chart. So, and of course, you talk about all the guitar solos and stuff. A lot of those guys were actually classic rock Kiss fans. So,
yeah. Fun fact: listen to the riff to Alive, their breakthrough song, and then listen to Love Theme from Kiss.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, I'm sure they would tell you, well, yeah, I don't doubt it. Because, Mike McCready actually appears on Ace Frehley's Origins Volume 1 on Cold Gin. I think it's on Cold Gin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these guys were all classic rock fans for sure.
Interesting.
All right, moving on to number 15, we have Tesla with Psychotic Supper. Will and Tim were pretty close on this one. Will rated it number 7 and Tim was number 9.
That means you get to talk about it first.
Yeah. So this might be a bit of a hot take for Tesla fans, but this is actually my favorite Tesla album over the first two. This album's just like the whole way through. Change in the Weather, Don't De-Rock Me. I think I said could fit on Creatures of the Night, and you didn't believe me.
Wow.
Didn't agree.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you didn't say it, but it's got a cool drum solo.
The drum part in the middle has that similar sound, I think. See. What You Give is a great slower song. Yeah. Awesome song. The album is, to me, it's nearly perfect, or as perfect as a Tesla album can be, at least.
It's probably my third favorite album after the first two. Like, for me, it probably goes Great Radio Controversy, Mechanical Resonance, and then this. And just for fun, we'll hold the CD up there again. So Will's got the CD, I've got the cassette. You may notice that the covers are similar, but a little bit different. Now, if you were to get the vinyl, I think that's what you'd get. Is that there? You guys remember when CDs came in long boxes?
Yep.
This is what the long box looked like.
Okay.
So then the CD comes out, and yeah. And of course, that is a picture of Nikola Tesla, the namesake of this band. Like nowadays, people hear Tesla, they think of Elon Musk, but Tesla was named after Nikola Tesla, he's true inventor of radio. The CD itself looks really cool.
And in the booklet looks like a larger poster of what the cassette's looking like.
Yeah. And what you give. Okay, so the singles off of this one was called Man Out of Time, which is crossed out. Then they called it Edison's Medicine. It's the only song I can think of where they switch the hook of the name of the song right midway through. Great tune. And it's all about how, Thomas Edison gets a lot of the credit for inventing radio, but a lot of the stuff that he took credit for, and Nikola Tesla had already discovered. That's how the story goes anyway. It's got a great middle section where they use a theremin, and I'm pretty sure we saw them do that live when we saw them open for Def Leppard. Did they do Edison's Medicines when we saw them? Anyway.
I get them. I've seen them 3 times, so they're all kind of blend together.
So the theremin, if you don't know what a theremin is, it looks like it's just an antenna with a box, and Jimmy Page uses it in some of the Led Zeppelin songs. It's a really cool song. Frank Hannon does a bit of a solo with a Rickenbacker bass at one point. And What You Give was the most successful song from here. I think it peaked at number 53. It's a ballad. It should have been bigger. Again, this came out in the fall of 1991. Traditional melodic hard rock was not in favor, although this album did go platinum. And, Tesla wrote out that particular era better than a lot of the bands from their era. Their next album, which didn't come out for 3 more years, still went gold. So they did all right. And Psychotic Supper is, if anyone, I'm not going to disagree if anyone calls it their favorite album, because it's worthy of it. Fantastic production on it too. I think it's the same team that's done all of their first 3 studio albums, Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero. Probably not, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but yeah, good album.
Jax.
I actually, this is not an album I've heard of a lot by Tesla. For me, I always went with the Great Radio Controversy. It's a favorite of mine as well. But today, just in preparation, just to refresh my memory, I went on Spotify and just listened to a few songs real quick on my lunch break. And it rocks hard, man. I like what I heard. I'm going to have to listen to it in full again soon. But you mentioned Edison's Medicine, Tim. That was probably, I was like, oh, yeah, that's my style. And the song right after it, Don't De-Rock Me, has a great catchy chorus, really like that. And even the closer that's called Toke About It was kind of catchy as well. So yeah, fuzzy, but I'm going to have to revisit it for sure.
Also, I forgot to mention another significant song in this album is called Song and Emotion, which they wrote about Steve Clark from Def Leppard, who, those 2 bands became very, very close friends in this area tour in 87, 88. They've toured together many times since then. And so sadly, Steve Clark passed away in January of 1991, which was, I think, a huge shock to all of us. It was the first time I can remember someone in a band that I followed dying that hadn't died like years before. I remember it was a bummer, to put it bluntly. And this is a nice tribute to him. And there's also moments in the song, if you listen to it, that sort of quote some Def Leppard bits, like the solo kind of sounds like the solo from High and Dry. There's a little bit of it that kind of sounds like Hysteria, the song. And at the very end of it, it kind of sounds like that sort of drone at the beginning of Gods of War. Like you could almost fade out Song and Emotion and go right into Gods of War.
Cool. Moving on to number 14, another record that Tim and Will were very close on. Tim rated this 11, Will 12. It's Honeymoon Suite with their 1991 album Monsters Under the Bed.
Yeah. Not the easiest vinyl to find.
Not the easiest CD to find, to be fair.
See, by this time, CDs and vinyl, they were kind of mirroring each other. It's the same cover art. This is actually a German issue. I don't even think it came out in vinyl in Canada, and they're Canadian. So this album came out on Warner Music in Canada, which is their label, or was their label. Didn't come out on Warner in the States. They lost their US deal at this point, and this was the last one they did for Warner in Canada. One very strange thing about this record, I've talked about this on a past episode. So, okay, so here's side one. Here's side two.
Oops.
Side two doesn't play. I think maybe the first song would play, but the label got stamped in the wrong spot. This is the only record I've got like this. So the first song on the album and the first single, great tune called Say You Don't Know Me, that became a concert staple. The last time that we saw Honeymoon Suite in concert, they opened with that song. Also, their rhythm section of Dave Betts on drums, Gary Lalonde on bass aren't on here. They had left, so there's like studio guys on here. Doesn't quite sound the same, but you still get Johnny D on vocals, Derry Green on guitar, and actually Ray Coburn came back on keyboards for this album because he wasn't on the third album. That was Rob Bruce. So it had The Road was a ballad single off this album. Little Sister's a fantastic rocker on this one. How Long is a good one. It's got a lot of good songs on it.
I've never heard it.
I only first listened to it actually this week while mowing the lawn. I really dig it. To me, it sounds a little bit like an album. A few of these seem like albums that are kind of out of time. Like we're in 1991, but some of these kind of sound like they're still late 80s kind of records. But yeah, I really like the album.
Yeah, it's just a solid album the whole way through. I find Tim pretty much covered the main points on it. But yeah, it's a good album from start to finish, I think.
It's also one of those stupid CDs that do this.
Ah.
Upside down. That's like, I hate that. All right.
So moving to number 13, we have Danger Danger with their second album, Screw It. I rated this at 15. Jex rated it at 16. If you want to go ahead, Jex, and talk about Danger Danger, Screw It.
Sure. I actually just listened to it a few days ago. It's a fairly new discovery for me. I don't have a physical copy. I wish I did. It just doesn't pop up in the wild very often.
No.
I discovered it thanks to the radio station where I volunteered, and they had a copy, so I listened to it. It's really good. It's just a fun album for what it is. Nothing to be taken seriously. It's a bit perverted. It's a little bit of a sleazy album. I mean, you look at the cover alone and you can tell because you have just a busty woman swinging on a vine with a huge gorilla holding a banana. Suggestive, but and even their titles here, like "Slipped Her the Big One," "Yeah You Want It."
That was their political song, wasn't it?
Is it actually? What else? I feel like there's another one. Oh, "Horny SOB." But what I thought was interesting, looking up the album, you have 3/4 of Extreme on here. So Gary Cherone, Nuno Betancourt, Pat Badger, they all made guest appearances. They do backing vocals on "Slip Her the Big One," and they also rap on "Yeah You Want It," which I thought was very cool. I think we're all a huge Extreme fan. And what else? There's an instrumental called "Puppet Show," and I could have sworn that was Nuno on guitar. It's very much his style, but it's not him. It's actually the guitarist Andy Timmons. But yeah, it's a really fun album. I enjoyed. I feel like I like it more with every listen, and I'd love to find myself a copy.
Yeah, I will keep my eyes out for you, Jex. So that's their second album. Came out in 1991. So already this style of music is starting to become passe, but they had a pretty good run. This was the last album that they did with their original vocalist Ted Poley for quite a while. So they did an album in 93, but it never actually really officially came out until like the 2000s. But yeah, the sexual innuendo was pretty strong on this one. If you can imagine someone taking like Cherry Pie and doing a whole album of Cherry Pie, that's pretty much like Screw It. So
that's perfect. That's the perfect depiction.
Yeah.
Description.
And I happen to think actually their guitarist, Andy Timmons, is one of the best guitarists, sort of underrated guitarist that I've ever heard. I think that might have been his last album record with Danger Danger 2.
I think so.
Do you have anything to add? All I have to add, I hate this album. I've listened to it. You gave me a cassette of it once. Years ago. Years ago.
Because I never had it.
Well, you gave it to me. You got a box.
Yes, that was from Bug. Andy, how you doing? Yeah, that's right. I never got into this band. You'd think that I would have. I just never did.
I listened to the cassette once and I threw it away. I listened to the album the other day for this video, and I made it like 20 minutes through and I had enough. I shut it off. That's all I have to add. One of those.
All right.
Hot takes.
Sorry about your broken ears. Okay, so number 12 is Harem Scarum self-titled album. Tim rated this one at number 6.
Man, when it comes to melodic rock, these guys are so good. And they still are. They're still putting out albums. They went on a bit of a hiatus. I did a review on their last one, Change the World, just last year. And this first album, like Matt kind of alluded to, maybe a few years too late. I think if this album had come out 3 or 4 years earlier, it would have made a bigger impact. But coming out at like midway through 1991, this type of melodic hard rock was really on the way out. It was about to become a laughing stock. It really was. And it's a shame. These guys wrote powerful, melodic, anthemic songs, whether they were writing ballads or whether they were writing rockers. Although I will say there's not a lot of pure rockers on this. Like almost every song on this album could conceivably have been a single. As a matter of fact, of the 10 songs, I think 5 of them were radio singles in Canada. This actually came out on vinyl, like the Honeymoon Suite record I talked about. I've never seen one for sale, but I'd love to get a copy of it. There's not much to the cover. The first single they ever came out with, Slowly Slipping Away, maybe one of my all-time favorite songs. It's one of those songs where if you're awake, it's just a good song to start the day off with. You just feel better for having heard it. And they've got some cool guest stars on here too. I've mentioned Honeymoon Suite. The song Love Reaction was co-written with Ray Coburn, keyboardist from Honeymoon Suite. And you can tell as soon as you hear it, it's got him all over it. Song Distant Memory, the second song, another one of my favorites, has background vocals from Carl Dixon of Coney Hatch. It sounds really good. And then a guy who's a great singer that no one ever talks about for Canadian singers is Paul McCausland from Haywire. He sings quite plainly. You can hear him on the bridge to the song How Long, the high harmony parts, and it's just so cool. And their guitar player, Pete L'Esperance, is like the Nuno of Canada. Like he's just... And so while I don't like this album as much as the one that followed, Mood Swings, this was a darn good start for them, and that's why I rated it so highly.
I'm not familiar with the band. I didn't have time to check it out in preparation. But you had me at Canadian Nuno. That sparked my curiosity, so I'll definitely have to check them out.
I'd say start with Mood Swings. If I was you, I'd start with the Mood Swings album.
Yeah,
okay.
I was kind of surprised in researching this album that it only got to 68 on the Canadian charts. I found out that the song Hard to Love was credited to Christopher Ward, Tim, who was a video jockey on the Much Music TV channel. So that was kind of
he was also a songwriter. He was a songwriter and a singer in his own right before Much Music. And he never really stopped writing songs. As a matter of fact, the song that probably pays his rent to this day is a song called Black Velvet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Land of Miles. Yeah.
Yes.
Will, did you get a chance to listen to this one?
I listened to it yesterday or a couple days ago, just pieces mostly, and I enjoyed it, but I can't really add anything else.
There's only one more thing that's unfortunate about this album, and Darren Smith is the drummer for Harem Scarum or for most of their stuff, and Matt can tell you he's also a good vocalist in his own right, and we saw him as Paul Stanley fronting a Kiss cover band, but unfortunately, I'm pretty sure everything on this album is a drum machine.
Oh.
It doesn't sound as obvious as some of the earlier drum machines in the 80s, but it's pretty mechanical sounding and there's not a lot of fills. So they almost sound like really well-produced demos. And it must have just been time constraints or something. Now, it's not to the detriment of the songs. If you hear one of them come on the radio, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But if you really listen to it, you go, I don't think that's a real drummer.
Yeah. Well, we've almost reached our top 10. At number 11, the second album by the Bullet Boys is Freak Show. Now,
there it is.
Jex rated this one pretty highly. Jex rated this number 6.
Did anybody else have this on their list? Or there you go. Yeah, I love this album. I bought this as a blind buy years ago. I bought it on cassette before I ever had it on CD, not knowing what it was. And then when I got to listen to it, it was rewound at the beginning of side 2. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just start with side 2, which starts with a song called Good Girl. And you remember, Matt, it just starts with Dig It. And I was like, whoa. And then just the riffs and the guitar, I was sold already. I thought the vocalist, which his name is escaping me right now, but I thought he kind of had what is it?
Mark Torian.
Right. I thought he had kind of a David Lee Roth charisma thing going. I'm not in his voice. I'm not saying they have similar voices, but in the attitude, he even does little shrieks and little shouts. So I was.
He kind of looks like him too. Like he kind of had the same hair.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, there's a band right here.
Yeah.
And it's I really enjoy their music. Good Girl became my favorite song. It's the first one I heard. I was like, this has me sold. Thrill That Kills is another really great hard rocker. They have a Tom Waits cover on here called Hang On St. Christopher, which I think I like their version better than the Tom Waits version. And overall, just a great solid album. And I feel like it doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Yeah, Bullet Boys.
Yeah, I actually picked up that cassette after hearing or actually seeing the video for their cover of Hang On St. Christopher. I didn't know at the time it was a Tom Waits cover. And as it turns out, I actually have 2 albums with that song covered. 1995, Rod Stewart's album, A Spanner in the Works, also covered.
Wow.
Really?
Hang On St. Christopher. Which I was very.
That's an interesting bit of trivia there. What do Rod Stewart and the Bullet Boys have in common?
Yeah, exactly.
You never knew.
Huh.
And the only other thing I was going to say about this record, apparently some versions have like a completely different track listing, like not just 1 or 2 songs switched up, but like just like a completely different order for the songs. So
yeah, I heard that too. Here's the full cover.
Very cool. Should we move into our top 10? Yes?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Number 10 is Great White's album, Hooked. Anyone have that one? I've got the CD. Tim's got the cassette.
I got the CD too. I just thought I'd get the cassette out for Brian's sake.
So this one,
that's a Hugh Syme cover, by the way.
Yeah, I would love to find the original uncensored version of that cover. This one is actually.
You mean this?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. They did a real good version of photoshopping that one to censor it. But so that one came out February 26, 1991. It's Great White's 5th album. Came off a really huge album, Twice Shy. It actually went gold in 1 month, so it did pretty well for them. But I think, again, at that time, I loved the previous album, but I didn't actually get into this one until fairly later. It's not as varied, I find, as the previous album. A lot of the songs kind of really sound just like the Once Bitten, Twice Shy. It's like they just kind of rewrote that song over and over again. Although it does have a few kind of epic songs like Desert Moon I really like from this album.
Yeah, the single off this album, Call It Rock and Roll, which I think did okay. It almost hit the top 40. Sounds a lot like Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Yep. So it sounds like, because Once Bitten, Twice Shy is an Ian Hunter song, it sounds like they tried to write their own version of it. I really like, I didn't like Great White back in the day. There's a couple songs on here I really do like. I like Desert Moon, which Desert Moon, of course, unfortunately, the band now is linked to that tragedy, because that was the song that they started in with, the nightclub where the fire was. But anyway, I really like the song Heartbreaker. and I really like. It's actually a cover. Can't Shake It, and Can't Shake It is was originally done by the Australian band Angel City, and that's the second time that Great Whites covered that band, because people might know their song Face the Day, which was also an Angel City cover. And if anybody out there like me is a Coney Hatch fan, on their fourth album, Four, they do the song Marseille, which is also an Angel City song.
Right on. Anyone else?
I don't have much written down for this. I liked Great White more when I first started listening to music, because I knew Once Bitten, Twice Shy is like one of the main songs that you first hear when you're getting into music. And Great White's kind of faded for me, but I did listen to this album a little bit, to pieces of it. And the opening track, Call It Rock and Roll, the vocals are great, the riff is great, that song's great. As for the rest of the album, I'm not familiar enough with it to make any other comments.
I'm also not as familiar with Great White. Once Bitten, Twice Shy also is probably the beginning and end of my knowledge, and I cannot stand that song, so it always turned me off with checking the band, which I know I should. I shouldn't base my opinions on one song, but someday I will.
All right. Going into our number 9 is an album I'm actually really not that familiar with, but I think Tim will want to talk about. It's Europe with Prisoners in Paradise. Tim rated this as top 5.
Yeah, I love this album. And this is an example, again, the fall of 1991 for melodic hard rock. Not good, not good, not good. I have never seen an album sync without a trace any quicker than this album. I've got a cassette copy that's sealed, actually. This came out September of 1991 with little or no promotion. I read about it in Metal Edge, and I was already a fan of the band. So the fact that it sunk without a trace, at least in North America, in their native Sweden and other parts of Europe, I think it still did okay. And they actually had a pretty big hit single with a song called "I'll Cry for You." But over here, it was in the delete bins before you knew what hit them. And it's really weird, because we're talking about coming off of 2 platinum albums. So obviously with the Final Countdown in 86, which I think sold a couple of million copies, and the follow-up in 88, Out of This World, sold 1 million again. So here they are following up 2 platinum albums with an album I don't even think it charted. So it just died. And it's a shame, because I think a lot of people didn't get to hear. It's a different album for them. First and foremost, it was produced by Beau Hill. And it's the first time that they worked with Beau Hill. So if you can imagine a Winger album with Joey Tempest on vocals, that's kind of what Prisoners in Paradise sounds like. It's got that, the production sounds a lot like the second Winger album, In the Heart of the Young, especially the drums. First track, All or Nothing, catchy as I don't know what. It was co-written by Eric Martin from Mr. Big. And with that knowledge in mind, you listen to it again, you can almost hear where it could have been a Mr. Big song. Second track, I just love. It's called Halfway to Heaven. It was co-written with Jim Vallance. And if it had come out a few years earlier, I'm pretty sure it would have been a radio hit. It was just a good mid-tempo rock song. And just song after song. Bad Blood's a good one. Little Bit of Lovin', that sounds a lot like Winger. It's just good from start to finish. It doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you didn't really like Europe before, doesn't really mean you wouldn't like this album. Because like I said, it's got a lot of that American sound to it. Doesn't sound like Rat as far as Beau Hill goes, but I hear a lot of Winger production value on this one. But yeah, it died. I don't know anyone else that bought it than me.
I will agree with that. If you don't really like prior Europe, you might like this. I listened to this yesterday with prior knowledge of the Final Countdown, which, similar to Jex, I can't stand it in terms of Once Bitten, Twice Shy. But I really enjoyed this album. Wasn't expecting to, but it was a pleasant surprise.
I did a little bit of quick research on it. Again, I'm not really familiar with the record. I know they really wanted Bob Rock for this one. They ended up with Beau Hill. And I was reading some of the credits, Tim, and you mentioned the Winger sound. Nate Winger and Paul Winger do background vocals on this. So I assume those are, yeah, Kip Winger's brothers or cousins.
They're Kip brothers. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
So
brothers. That's right.
Yeah, they actually did a really good side project called Blackwood Creek, featuring all the Winger guys. So if you ever want to check that out, but I heard that there's some demo tracks that they haven't been officially released, but you can find them for free on YouTube. Did you hear anything about that? I have a list of five.
They wrote a lot of songs for this album besides the 12 that ended up on it. And a lot of them ended up on a 2-disc best of they put out in the early 2000s. But then there's some others that still didn't. So yeah, they were really, they had an entire album probably around 1990 that they presented to Sony. And they said, no, go back, do another one. So that delay again might explain why, they'd been out of the public eye for quite a long time. So, and the other thing about this album is that it's funny that you mentioned that they wanted to work with Bob Rock because, well, first of all, that's two now that we've talked about that wanted to work with Bob Rock. And as we're going to learn, he was tied up that year. And by the way, there's going to be another one. But I thought Beau Hill was perfect for this album. And I think this album didn't need a Bob Rock production. I think Beau Hill did a fine job because it is more radio friendly. I'm really kind of surprised they didn't work with Ron Nevison again, who produced their previous album, Out of This World, because if anybody's never heard Europe's Out of This World, but they've heard Crazy Nights by Kiss, it is the identical production sound. Identical. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Number 8 is an album. Actually, Tim rated this number 3. It's Aldonova's Blood on the Bricks. Tim, you want to talk about this one?
Speaking of albums that came out and died. So Aldonova, most people know him from his 1982 breakthrough hit Fantasy. He did 3 albums in the 80s, and he was kind of a one-man band. He could do pretty much everything. He played guitar, he sang, he played bass, he played keyboards. And he had a deal with Sony or CBS at the time that kind of went sour. So he basically sat out of the music business for 6 years. And in that time, he wrote songs for other people. He's responsible or to blame or whatever for writing some of the first English-speaking songs for Celine Dion, introducing her to start singing in English. And of course, Celine Dion, everybody knows what happened with her. And but on this album, Blood on the Bricks, which I'll show you here, kind of looks like a Hugh Syme album cover, but isn't. This came out in the summer of 1991 again. And all of the songs are co-written and the album is co-produced by John Bon Jovi. So back in 1982, John Bon Jovi was just a young kid that was working at his cousin Tony's studio, the Power Station in New York City. Aldonova was working on his first album. They got to know each other then, and they've been friends since then. Aldonova's name is credited for keyboards and background vocals on the first Bon Jovi album. As the story goes, Aldonova, again, like I said, was out of the music business. In 1989, Bon Jovi played in Montreal to, probably the Forum, huge crowd. And at the end of the night, they brought Aldonova out. And he got a taste of, being in front of the big crowd again and looked at John and said, yeah, let's do something. So the first thing that these two guys did was work together on an album that Matt just loved when it came out. If anybody recalls their Best of 1990 episode, the Young Guns 2 soundtrack, or also known as Blaze of Glory. Aldonova he didn't co-write that, but he played on it and he had a lot to do with the arranging. They went straight from that album into this album, Blood on the Bricks, which they originally wanted either Bruce Fairbairn or Bob Rock to produce. Obviously, Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock's the dream team that produced Slippery When Wet, that produced New Jersey, Permanent Vacation. The list goes on and on. And either of those two guys, I think, would have been perfect for this, especially Fairbairn. We know Bob Rock was tied up. Bruce Fairbairn was tied up in what ended up being a really long, protracted production for Aerosmith's Get a Grip. So a lot was riding on that album. So they ended up producing it themselves, which, unfortunately, it's not badly produced, but there's an aspect of it that I think could have been better. This album, again, if it had come out 2 or 3 years earlier, I think would have legitimately been a hit. There are so many potential singles on this album. A couple of great ballads, Someday, which was a single, another song called Hey Ronnie, Veronica's song, both great songs. Melodic rock song, Bang Bang. Again, you know, you can kind of get the idea of John Bon Jovi co-writing. This Ain't Love, Touch of Madness, Young Love. The title song, Blood on the Bricks, is kind of about gang warfare. I kind of like the look of the CD there too. And that was the first video. And I remember seeing this video come on Much Music one night, summer 91. I didn't know who it was. I knew I liked the song. I looked at them, a bunch of, well, I'll show you here. These aren't the guys that played in the album except for Aldo, who's in the middle, but you get the idea of what they look like. And I'm like, who are these guys? You know, I first looked at them vaguely, saw the hair. I'm like, is this new Honeymoon Suite? Which, no, that was a few months later. Like, who are these guys? Like, you know, this guy's a good singer. He also plays guitar. What am I watching? And the label came on at the end, Aldo Nova, Blood on the Bricks, which is like, oh, okay. I remember reading that John Bon Jovi had said in interviews that he was working with someone and it's a secret. He said, you know, you're going to be surprised when you find out who. That must have been it. And this album came out and it sank without a trace. And Aldo never has yet to put out another full-length album of just songs. He did kind of an experimental album in the mid-90s, then he did an EP a few years ago, which was mostly remakes. But I really think this album could and should have been a hit. It just came out a few years too late. The drummer on this album is Kenny Aronoff, who's a well-known session drummer. Most people know who Kenny Aronoff is. I don't like the drum sound they got for him on here. I think it could have benefited from, again, that Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock, hard-hitting Tico Torres sound. I think I would have loved to have heard another mix of this album with the drums mic'd up. But don't let that stop you. For a while, this was everywhere to pick up cheap in the delete bins. If you see it, pick it up. It's good.
I'll have to check it out. Once again, that's one that I didn't have a chance to check out. And Aldo Nova, for me, it begins and ends with fantasy. That's all I really know. So yeah, I'm going to have to take notes here and remember that.
Will, are you familiar with that record?
Even if I had something to add, I don't know what I would add to what Tim just said.
We just got the full biography on Aldo Nova. Thank you. Squeaking into lucky number 7 is Mr. Big. Their second studio album is Lean Into It. Jex actually rated this one pretty high. It cracked his top 10.
Really? I don't even remember. I don't even remember what I rated it. But yeah, I don't have too much to say about it other than it's a great album all the way through. Mr. Big is another band. Like, I'll be honest, this is the only album by them I own. It's the one I've listened to the most, and I like it a lot. I'm not a ballad guy. I mentioned that in our 1990 video, but the To Be With You is a ballad I like every time I hear it. It's just so soothing and soft, and it has a black and white video, much like More Than Words. So that was the trend at the time. But yeah, the whole thing, even the very beginning, I think it's probably my favorite song. The opener is Daddy, Brother, Lover, Little Boy, also known as the Electric Drill song. And you hear them playing their guitar with an electric drill at the beginning. It starts out with that woo, woo, and that is such a cool effect. Yeah, the album just gets better from that point on. And the titles are actually escaping me right now, but that's all I can say. I love it. I love it.
I do have to ask, what's with 1991, an album starting with electric drill sounds, Tim?
I know. Yeah, and I didn't want to say it.
And might I add, this came first. This came out in early 1991. Yeah. At one point, Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan are both, you know.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to add, track 4 is called CDFF Lucky This Time. So it starts off with, sounds like your compact disc is fast forwarding. So that's what the CDFF stands for, compact disc fast forward. I also didn't realize that CDFF is actually the chord structure of the song, which is kind of funny. So there you go.
I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that either.
Yeah.
Wow. It's funny because back when we did our Best of 89 episode, I talked about the first Mr. Big album. I liked a few songs on it, but it didn't bowl me over like I thought it would, because this band was really, really hyped. You know, it was Billy Sheehan's next thing he's doing after Diggly Rock. To me, this is where it all came together for them. It's still probably their best album all the way through. And it was definitely their most successful, although That's with an asterisk. I got this when it first came out, and by the end of the year, it was out of the charts. Again, it wasn't the time for this type of music, but I thought it had great songs on it. I'm really surprised that the first single from this album wasn't a hit, because it wasn't your typical hard rock song. It was a little bit different. It was called Green Tinted 60s Mind. Fantastic pop rock song about how the explanation, why it's called how it is that, they say there's a little blurb before each song in the credits here. It says, "Do you ever notice how you watch 60s movies, they kind of have a green tint to them?" That's what it's about. It's got a really unique Paul Gilbert tapping riff, which I won't try to replicate. And then, if you take out the CDFF, Lucky This Time is a fantastic melodic rock song written by Jeff Paris, which if you look his name up, or Jeff Lead, his real name, he's penned a few classics in his time. Never Say Never is another catchy song, which may have been the same type of sessions as the Europe song, because it's co-written by Jim Balance. They actually had like a top 30 single off of this called Just Take My Heart, which is a more typical power ballad. But I do remember liking the album right away, and I listened to it a lot, but it wasn't successful. It had fallen off the charts. And then, much to my surprise, sometime in early 1982, was listening to the radio, and what do I hear but the last song on this album, To Be With You. And out of nowhere, this song goes all the way to number one. It was a number one song. And it wasn't my favorite song on the album. I didn't give it much thought. And apparently they didn't either. It's the last song on the album. That's not where you put your potential singles. But it went to number one, and it drove this album to platinum status. So I was happy for them. They didn't really follow it up, but at least they had their moment. And I still think, I just listened to it this morning. It's really good all the way through. Eric Martin's got one of those bulletproof voices. He's like, he's like a livelier version of Paul Rogers crossed with maybe Sammy Hagar, but it's just really, really good. And the song starts off, the album starts off with an electric drill. It's a trend this year, a strange one.
We've almost hit our top five. At number 6, ranking that's kind of actually still blowing my mind. I'll explain that in a second. Number 6 is David Lee Roth with A Little Ain't Enough. Now, I thought I really liked this album. I ranked it at number 9, but Will ranked it at number 8. Will, do you want to talk about David Lee Roth, A Little Ain't Enough?
David Lee Roth has always been kind of what I steered to when I was getting into Van Halen. Over that, when Sammy Hagar joined Van Halen, I was more into the David Lee Roth solo albums. So these albums like Skyscraper, Yankee Rose, A Little Ain't Enough, these albums stuck with me a lot. Just same as anything David Lee Roth has done. Catchy, fun. The album might be 30, 40 minutes. It feels like it's 15, 20 just because all the songs are more upbeat and it's poppier. Lady Luck's a good song. Hammerhead Shark, just catchy, not poppier, but like more his.
It's Dave. It's classic.
It
Dave.
Comes through with him. So
is this the first album that we've talked about that all four of us have?
Oh, is that right?
So. I don't know. It's the only one. 3 of us held it up. So
yeah, I held it up too.
Yeah. What I remember about this, which is kind of odd, is that it's the first time that I remember being very surprised to see this album show up in the delete bins. It wasn't a hit. There wasn't any hit singles off of this album. He did have singles on it. But again, David Lee Roth at this point had never done anything that wasn't platinum, whether with Van Halen or whether solo. So this came out very early 1991. It was produced by Bob Rock. So this is one of the reasons that Bob Rock was tied up in Vancouver. Great production. And he had David Lee Roth's always had great musicians. And this was the first time that he recorded with a different band besides like Steve Vai, Billy Sheehan, and Greg Bissonette. This time around, he actually had a guy that's played with Alice Cooper on one of the guitars named Steve Hunter. He's played on he plays a lot with Bob Ezra and like the Welcome to My Nightmare. Brett Tuggle on keyboards. He's a holdover. I guess Greg Bissonette does play on this, and his brother Matt Bissonette is on bass. But the big story behind this album is that he had a young guitar virtuoso named Jason Becker. And very sadly, Jason Becker would not tour this album because by the time he was ready to go on tour, he was diagnosed with ALS and he's wheelchair bound, but the guy still makes music to this very day, which is pretty inspiring. He was replaced on tour by a guy named Joe Holmes, who I think very briefly ended up in Ozzy's band. And they went on tour with Cinderella and Extreme. Okay. So Extreme, then Cinderella, then David Lee Roth, and they could not do a third of arenas. This tour was a bust. The album was a bust. It's just sad because it's a good album. It's really, really fun.
And most people would kill for a lineup like that now.
Yeah.
That'd sell out so fast.
It did go gold. It did go gold probably right away. But, for a guy that's used to having platinum, double platinum, it was a big turn. And he never really recovered from that.
Yeah. Took about 3 months for that one to go gold. It's actually my favorite David Lee Roth album, believe it or not. Like Will said, it's super fun. I like it top to bottom. So
Lady Luck's great. I love that song. But yeah, it's 40 Below. Hammerhead Shark is pretty good. Yeah.
Another album that feels a little bit out of time. You look at the first song, Little Ain't Enough. The video for that could have came from his 1985 Crazy from the Heat. It looks just like a typical Dave kind of video. And then I think he kind of figured it out with Sensible Shoes, which is kind of it's obviously a slower song and more thoughtful song, but the video, it looks like it's very dark and it's got all the kind of the wispy smoke and it's black and white and it's starting to look more like videos of the time. So,
yeah.
I've actually had the CD for quite some time, a couple of years, and I just listened to it for the first time maybe a few months ago. And I didn't dislike it, but I feel it has to grow on me, and it will. I know it will. But for me, it's always my top David Lee Roth album is Eat 'Em and Smile. I don't feel like that album can be topped. I mean, you have him combined with Steve Vai. You can't get better than that. Skyscraper is okay, but I feel like it will grow on me over time. Just the first listen, I was like, all right. But I'm confident,
Well, we've made it to our top 5. And we might have to have a little chat with Will about this one. Number 5 is Metallica, the self-titled album, the Black Album. Most of us rated it pretty high. Actually, Jex rated it at number 3. I rate it number 7. Tim rated it number 8. However, Will rated this one at number 25.
Boy, look at the time.
Not a big fan, Will?
I didn't know we were doing dishonorables already.
Oh. Jeez.
I won't start. I don't want to dampen the mood right now. I'll let other people go first.
Jex, you rated it at number 3. Do you want to talk about Metallica's Black Album?
Yeah, and I just want to start off by saying I had to be careful not to pull out my soundtrack copy of This Is Spinal Tap. This is the Black Album right here. And I can understand Will's point of view. I know he hasn't said his opinion yet, but I know a lot of fans were kind of, they were accusing them of selling out at this point because it's no longer thrash. It's so much more radio friendly. And, I prefer, for me, it's all about Ride the Lightning. That's my favorite Metallica album. And this is not that. It's not the same at all. I still like the album for what it is. I am tired of Enter Sandman, though. I will say that gets a lot of radio play. But there's some heavy hitters on here. Sad But True is great. Of Wolf and Man, Through the Never is another favorite of mine. So yeah, is it the best Metallica album? Absolutely not. But it's good for what it is. It's good for me. This was the last good Metallica album for years, for a long time. But I still like to revisit it from time to time.
I still think it's a terrific album. I also love Ride the Lightning too, Jex. So this one went like 16 times platinum just in the USA. The only thing I really my knock on this album. So Enter Sandman was the first song that they started working on for this record. And once they found kind of the mix for Enter Sandman, that's kind of what they based the whole record on. But the problem was they had to get Sandman ready to actually release the album. They were always constantly kind of under the gun with these deadlines, like 6 months in advance, when we know we have to get the artwork done by this time and this song done by that time and the first single. Anyway, where I'm going with this, they actually talk a lot about this stuff on the making of the album. This is the classic album series for the Black Album. And one of the things that Bob Rock talks about is they actually spent, so once the album's all done and recorded, they have to do the final mix. They took about 10 days mixing Sandman to come up with that particular sound. And you know, if you've ever heard that Enter the Sandman riff on the radio, how well that comes through. Well, they spent 10 days on Sandman. He says they spent about 4 to 5 hours on Holier Than Thou and some of the other songs. I wish they'd had the time, and deadlines didn't work for them, but in this case, but I wish they'd had the time to every song treat it like they did Sandman, because that would have been fantastic.
It's pretty amazing that this album did what it did. I mean, I remember distinctly here it being in Shoppers Drug Mart, and the radio, they just had, you know, a top 40 radio station playing. And I heard Enter Sandman when, you know, this is when it was like first out on the charts, on the radio all the time. And I remember thinking, I never thought I'd see the day where I'd hear Metallica at Shoppers Drug Mart. And what the wonderful thing about the success of the Black Album is that it brought all of those previous albums with it to a certain extent. I don't think any of them are less than double platinum. You know what I mean? And I mean, And Justice for All is like 6 times platinum, which that is such an uncommercial sounding album. And it's all in the wake of the success of the Black Album. That's a lot of people that went back and checked out those earlier albums. And I mean, they toured on this album for, you might as well say 3 years, maybe close to 4. And this is actually the first time I remember when they put out A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica. It's the first time that I saw the making of an album that intensely, like concentrating on just seeing what it took to put an album together and how a song starts out to how it ends up. And I've got that Classic Albums documentary too that Matt mentioned. That's a great series, period. And that really sheds a lot of light on it. And my favorite quote from Bob Rock talking about that is that Lars knew before anybody knew that Sandman was the song, meaning the song that was going to do it for them. And he says, I didn't hear it. He thought Holier Than Thou was going to be the first single and the first track on the album. And it's hard to imagine a world where that song would have been the one that caught on and was the big hit single for them. As far as the tracks on the album, it's not an album I listen to all that much, but I've never had a problem with it. Sad But True is one of those songs I can't get tired of. I love Wherever I May Roam. Of the songs that weren't singles, I'm pretty sure Of Wolf and Man is my favorite. And I like the last song on it too, Through the Never. Not Through the Never, Struggle Within. Oh, yeah. But I mean, you know, it's deserved, I think, of all of the success that it had. And it brought heavy metal into the mainstream like never before. Like bands like Anthrax and Megadeth and Slayer would never have been platinum selling bands if it weren't for Metallica. Because a lot of people got into them and thought, okay, well, who else is kind of like them? And then there's Will.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this with a few things. I don't like thrash, so I couldn't really ever get into Kill 'Em All. I like Reload more than Load. And my favorite Metallica album is Death Magnetic. So, like, is my opinion really valid?
Of course it is.
Okay.
Of course it is.
Yeah. So,
it's wrong, but it's valid.
It's not even that I don't like Enter Sandman, because I still think that's a great song. My favorite song is probably My Friend of Misery. I spent a lot of time learning the intro to that on bass.
That's a fun intro.
But then the rest of it is meh. I don't know. I tried to listen to it, and when I first got into Metallica, I listened to this a lot, because who didn't when they first got into Metallica? But listening through it, I mean, Enter Sandman's great, and then it goes through all this. To me, the songs kind of sound the same. they're kind of boring. Dare I say that they're boring? And then My Friend of Misery comes on. It's awesome, and then it ends, and that might be my favorite part when it's over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. It was my dishonorable mention when we were originally doing dishonorables, but yeah,
Man.
I'll leave it there. Moving on.
All
right.
This will be my last episode, likely.
Here's something.
Are you kidding?
Here's
Are you kidding?
something more cheerful for Will to talk about. And we're at number 4 now. This is Ozzy Osbourne, really at the height of his powers and in the best condition maybe of his life. Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears at number 4. Actually, Will rated this at number 1. Will, do you want to talk about No More Tears?
So this is my favorite album from '91. This is my favorite Ozzy album. Mama, I'm Coming Home is quite possibly my favorite Ozzy song. Like, there's nothing wrong with this album. This album's essentially perfect. Starting off with Mr. Tinker Train, that's excellent. I Don't Want to Change the World is a bit slower, but still good. No More Tears is obviously great. Zombie Stomp is fun. Hellraiser's great. This is what Ozzy is for me, is this album. I just think it's great from start to finish. His vocals on this album are great, especially on Mama, I'm Coming Home. He really hit the higher notes. He sounded really good. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I guess this is the second album they did with Zakk Wylde in the band after Jake E. Lee left. Obviously, after Randy Rhoads was out of the picture as well.
Yeah, an interesting little tidbit. Bob Daisley, who's worked with Ozzy Osbourne for quite a while, played all the bass parts on this. Although you see Mike Inez, who would later go on to join. Yeah. I guess he wrote the riff for the No More Tears song, but it's Bob Daisley actually playing the bass on this album. I love it too. I rank it. It's number 6 for me.
Yeah, No More Tears is great. The title track always reminds me of a horror movie for some reason, but in the form of a song. It's like, I don't know if it's the eerie tone, and Ozzy's voice is also kind of eerie, but I think it's because when I first heard the song, I was in the process of watching all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So when I'd hear the song, I could kind of envision certain scenes in my head, and it just matched perfectly with the song. And I fell in love with it right away. I think No More Tears is a terrific song. The song Hellraiser is another one. It was actually co-written by Lemmy from Motorhead. And the following year, Motorhead would actually record their own version of Hellraiser. And it would appear on their album March or Die, as well as the Hellraiser 3 soundtrack. I think both versions are really good, the Ozzy one and the Motorhead one. Favorites on here for me are Mr. Tinker Train, I Don't Want to Change the World, and Zombie Stomp, just to name a few.
Awesome. Will, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to see this. They put out a documentary about Ozzy at the same time called Don't Blame Me. It's probably the best thing I've ever seen on Ozzy. In fact, probably one of my favorite documentaries on any kind of band. So check that out if you haven't seen it. So it does cover all his origin story, and also the last third of it is probably the making of No More Tears.
You know, a lot of people talk about, they'll talk about Blizzard of Oz or Diary of a Madman as the classic Ozzy albums, but this album was huge for him.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because, in a period where a lot of the melodic rock bands were suffering sales-wise and their careers were dying, Ozzy puts out probably his most accessible album, his most commercial album, and it's a hit. It's a huge hit. Mama, I'm Coming Home, great song, great ballad. It was a big hit for him. I mean, it was weird hearing Metallica in Shoppers Drug Mart. It was weird hearing Casey Kasem talk about Ozzy Osbourne because he had this top 30, top 20 single, and it's a great song, and I agree. I don't think his vocals ever sounded better. And it's the same production team, Dwayne Barron and John Purdell, that produced that Brittany Fox album. So chances are, if Zakk Wylde appeared on the Brittany Fox album. I bet you like it was like one was Studio A, one of them was a Studio B. I also see that Will's got a deluxe or a reissue version of this. Oh, and here's another question for you, Matt. What does AVH stand for?
A lot of people
have,
he's never actually said. Chris Jericho apparently interviewed Ozzy one time. Ozzy said that it stands for Aston Villa Highway, which is some kind of reference to the Aston Villa Football Club, essentially the soccer club from Birmingham, England, where Ozzy is from. So he's got a few of those in his career. There's another one on here called SIN, where it's not really explained what the acronym means, but. And actually, he won a Grammy for "I Don't Want to Change the World." I don't even know if that was a single, but yeah, he won a Grammy for that song.
It's a great song, probably my favorite.
Cool video. We are on to number 3. This was actually ranked my number 2. It's Alice Cooper's "Hey Stupid," the 12th solo album from Alice Cooper. I'm not really sure where this fits into the whole entire discography, but came out July 2nd, 1991. There it is on vinyl. Everybody's got a copy of it. Very cool. I actually was really excited to hear, I'm quite a big video gamer. This is a game called Watch Dogs. Came out for the PlayStation 4 in 2014. The song "Dangerous Tonight" from "Hey Stupid" was actually highly featured in that game. I thought it was kind of funny. I've never been able to track this down, but apparently they put out a CD, a promotional CD in 1991 to go along with this album. It was called "Stupid News," and it was 15 sound bites of Alice Cooper reading out about these weird tidbits like "rock and roll bat belts hits, voodoo snake cures headaches, buying goats to watch them faint." All these stupid little news tidbits.
It's very Alice.
Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about "Hey Stupid"?
It's of the Alice tends to do albums in pairs. And I think this album pairs up with "Trash" from 1989.
Yeah.
And I think this is the better album for a lot of reasons. I think the production's better, way better. Peter Collins produced this album, who had just come off of producing the previous 2 Queensryche albums. Mickey Curry, session drummer. I mean, he's Bryan Adams' drummer, but he's also a session drummer. Very, very hard hitting, and it fits the songs on here. I just think there's a lot of successful songs, the songs that make sense for Alice. Ironically, I was never the biggest fan of the title song. I know that was to be the big anthem, and it was an anti-suicide song, and that's great, but it's never been one of my favorites. I think there's better songs on here that could have been singles. Obviously, probably the best known song on here is "Feed My Frankenstein," because of Wayne's World, where Alice actually appears playing it in the Wayne's World movie, and he's got that memorable, speaking role, Milwaukee, and all of that. That's where the "We're Not Worthy" came from. Well, no, I think "We're Not Worthy" might have originated on the Wayne's World skit on SNL previous, but people started doing it to Alice after the movie. One thing I would say is, if people haven't heard it and you're a fan of the "Hey Stupid" album, seek out either a foreign version or the CD single to "Hey Stupid," or an Australian compilation called "Freedom for Frankenstein" for a great song called "It Rained All Night," which is an Alice Desmond Child song, which, like a lot of the songs on here could have fit right in on the album. I think the deluxe version restores it. Great tune, but all the songs in this album are great. There's some good ballads on here. "Might As Well Be on Mars" is fantastic. He's got a lot of cool guest stars on here. Somebody else can probably talk about that more, but it's a great album. And unfortunately, other than "Feed My Frankenstein," he doesn't tend to do much from this album in concert, and I kind of wish he would.
I agree with Tim that I do prefer this over "Trash."
Let's put it this way. There's nothing on this album I like singularly as much as I like the song "Poison," but as an album of songs, I would rather listen to "Hey Stupid."
That was exactly what I was just going to say. And the artwork's really cool.
Yeah.
Alice looks really cool here. He looks like he sounds, unlike earlier in the 80s. The songs are really catchy. Snake Bite's a really good song. I will disagree with Tim in the title track. I love that song. Probably one of the first, it would have been one of the earliest songs I heard when I had that live from Vakken CD.
Right.
Because it's on that.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to Alice. So that song I've always loved. So when I heard it on this album, I've loved this album ever since then.
We're actually going to have a bit of a difference of opinion because when it comes to trash in this, I prefer trash as an album. That's just my personal taste. I like the songs better on trash. This one, it's taken me a little longer to get into. Once again, I know I said that earlier, but it's still a great album. I too like K Stupid, the title track. I think it's a very solid title track. And of course, Feed My Frankenstein, the 2 hits on here. But yeah, not a bad album. But if you compare it to trash, I prefer. It's not really trash, but yeah, still a good album.
Right on. We're all the way up to number 2 now. This is actually Tim's number 1 album, so maybe we get Tim to talk about it. Although Will rated this as his number 2, so Will agrees with the group on this one. It's Van Halen's For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge.
Yeah.
Got my vinyl copy. Thanks, Tim.
Nice.
Who wants to talk about?
Go ahead, Will. Start us off. I'm a little surprised you rated this as high as you did.
What do you mean? This was the first Sammy Hagar Van Halen album I got into. It's not my favorite anymore, but it was the first one I got into. Obviously starting off with Pound Cake. Again, with the drill. It's a great song. It took me a really long time to get into some of this more, like right now, Top of the World more sounds like the 5150 stuff. I think more so than like Judgment Day or Run Around is a great song. But yeah, I had to rank this number 2. It's a great Van Halen album.
This isn't just my favorite of the Sammy Hagar Van Halen albums. This is my favorite Van Halen album. Period.
Wow. And the video.
This is one of those albums, and I know we all have these. You can play it in your head from start to finish. I remember distinctly finding this album, and I didn't even know they had an album coming out. It had been 3 years since OU812, and it was so new that I actually pulled it out of the box in the store that I found it in when I first bought the cassette. And I couldn't believe how good it was. It's one of the best sounding albums. This was the first time since 1984 that they worked with Ted Templeman, but actually Andy Johns produced the majority of the album. I think Ted Templeman, what I read in his in Greg Runoff's biography of him, mostly worked with Sammy on his vocals, which is really funny because Ted Templeman worked with Sammy in Montrose in the early 70s, produced the first 6 Van Halen albums. He produced Dave's like Crazy from the Heat, Need 'Em and Smile. He produced Sammy's VOA. He's almost every combination of Van Halen he's worked with. I just think the sound is pristine on here. I couldn't believe how heavy Judgment Day was. Again, Pound Cake starts off with the drill, and I don't know who discovered it first, Eddie or Paul Gilbert. I think it's a case of great minds thinking alike. My interpretation, like Eddie would fiddle with stuff, and he was drilling into the guitar, and it echoed, and he quickly put together, if you do a certain thing, you can actually use it melodically. Not much different than using a bow like Jimmy Page used to do. But, I mean, he even had a drill made up with his trademark stripes. And Run Around was another great poppy song from this one. I love Pleasure Dome because it's so unlike Van Halen. Man on a Mission just has such a cool groove to it. As many times as I've heard right now, I never get sick of it. 316, which he wrote about Wolfgang, the little guitar instrumental, which in typical Eddie fashion had been sitting around for at least 5 years at that point, because if anyone's ever watched their home video Live Without a Net, which is from the 5150 tour, he sits on the edge of the stage and he plays like he basically, that's been sitting around for a while. It's named 316 because Wolfgang was born on March the 16th. And it was another big album for them. No big hit singles from this one, actually, surprisingly enough. You might be surprised to hear right now it wasn't even a top 40 single.
Really?
As big as that video was. Everybody most anybody that was around that knows that video. The highest charting song and the only song to make the top 40 from this was Top of the World. And I think it only got to about number 27. And the fun fact about Top of the World is that the riff to that goes all the way back to 1984. If you listen to the fade out of Jump, you can hear Eddie playing a primitive version of the Top of the World riff. I just think it's a perfect album. And that was when we started to talk about doing this list, that was always going to be my number one from 91.
You know, I'm thirsty all of a sudden. I sure could go for a Crystal Pepsi right now.
Yeah.
I was planning that one.
We'll give the folks a little chance to go on YouTube and type in Van Halen Crystal Pepsi if they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Will, do you get that one?
No, I'm not on the inside on this one.
Oh, well, that's what's going down on the inside. No, it was an SNL spoof, I think.
Well, there was actually like Crystal Pepsi was.
No, you're right. You're right. They actually licensed right now to use for Crystal Pepsi, which was a see-through Pepsi that they came out with that lasted about as long as New Coke in 1985. SNL did a parody of it for Crystal Gravy.
Gravy, yeah.
In my defense, I wasn't around in 91.
You were not. No. I'm sure it's out there on the YouTubes.
On the YouTubes, for sure.
But yeah, I'm going to make it quick. I like the album. When it comes to Hagar era, with the exception of 5150, because that's my favorite Hagar, the band Hagar album. But all the rest, they all kind of blend together in my brain because I got into them all at the same time. I listened to them, so I forget which songs are on which album. But I do know when I do pop it on, there's no dull moment. They're really a force to be reckoned with. So yeah, nothing bad to say about it.
So guys, before we actually talk about our number one ranked album, did you want to go through some of those honorable mentions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a couple.
Jack says a couple. Go for it.
All right. So traditionally, we say not to include soundtracks and compilations on these lists. That's why I keep them for the honorable mentions. So I respected the rules. So I have to talk about Bill Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack from 91. One of my favorite soundtracks of all time, along with Heavy Metal that I talked about in 81. Introduced me to a lot of bands, Megadeth, King's X, Winger, Faith No More. Steve Vai. This introduced me to Steve Vai back in the day. So it's really a solid soundtrack.
Some band called Kiss.
Oh, yeah, that's right. God gave rock and roll to you too. Yeah, and that was pre-Revenge. This was 1 year before.
That's right. Yeah.
And Will, you might know these guys. This is Rat.
Ooh, yeah.
81,
Actually,
91.
it's funny you mentioned that, Jax. When you said soundtracks, I thought you were going to whip out Point Break.
Oh, that's also a good one, but I prefer the Bill and Ted one. But yeah, Point Break soundtrack's pretty good too. Yeah, 81, 91 Rat. This got me into Rat. Such a solid compilation. It really is the best of the best. Will actually really got me into Rat lately. He's been talking about them, so I ended up picking their 5.
Doing what I can.
Yeah.
It's honest work. Pretty much, but it's honest work.
Yeah, so this is really great. Not a bad song on here. It actually has the song from Point Break, Nobody Rides for Free. That's solid.
Yeah.
And the only song on here actually not to feature Robin, right?
Yeah, he had left at that point.
Yeah. And real quick, I know these guys are not for everyone, right? And Tim, I'm talking about you. This is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I like them, and this is really a solid album.
I don't mind that one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can listen to that one.
This is where they found their sound. I find they're really meshing, and it's a sentimental value for me. It reminds me of just some good times. So yeah, honorable mention for that one. And this is one that needs more recognition. Not enough people know about this band. It's Driving and Crying. This is, I think, their second album called Fly Me Courageous, released in early 91, I think January. So good. This is like some just straight up rock with a bit of a southern rock edge to it. But if you guys don't know Driving and Crying, definitely give them a look. I think you'd all dig them, especially the title track, which is called Fly Me Courageous. Such a good tune, just a good catchy song. Other songs to check out: The Innocent, Build a Fire, and Rush Hour. Really, really good songs. So those are my honorable mentions.
Awesome, Jax. I'm gonna whip through mine real quick. Badlands' second album, Voodoo Highway. Andy Campbell, who's been on the show before, picked this up for me actually earlier in the year. Thanks, Andy. I wasn't into this album or band at the time, so this is sort of a going back and discovering kind of thing. I'm gonna fly through these. Saigon Kick's first album. I remember seeing this band again on Much Music. What was the main single? What You Say and What You Do. I really liked the band's look at the time. The lead singer had kind of a really unique look, but since then I've been really into Saigon Kick this year. An album that Tim absolutely hates and ranked as low as it can go on the TVC list. This is, of course, Nirvana's Nevermind. I really like this album. I know we're not really huge grunge fans. I even have the classic albums documentary on Nirvana. I love that album. I actually really liked the one that came out after it, In Utero, at the time. I don't listen to them very often, but at the time, it actually reminds me of driving to pick up my girlfriend. I used to listen to that album all the time. Anyway, just two more. Another one that ranked actually almost as low as Nirvana, Rod Stewart's Vagabond Heart. You're probably wondering, Rod Stewart, Vagabond Heart, man, what's going on here? So 1991 is the year I actually graduated from high school. And this was an album that came out. I heard some of the stuff on the radio, Rhythm of My Heart, Broken Arrow. I have a lot of nostalgia for this record. My mom actually owned this record. I owned this record. It's an album that we both kind of liked at the same time, which is kind of bizarre. And I re-listened to this a couple of days ago. Number 7, the Motown song. Bring over some of your old Motown records. Anyway, yeah, I really dig that album. And it puts me in a good mood. And one more that I was really, kind of surprised that didn't even make our top 20. Collection of albums, maybe Will might want to talk about these, but from Guns N' Roses, their Use Your Illusion albums. Of course, I have the DVDs as well from that gigantic tour. That's my honorable mentions.
So I only have two. One, the first one that I thought could maybe make the top 20 is Foreigner's album. This is from the Atlantic Studio Albums box set, which is why it's in this sleeve. But this is the first album without Lou Gramm on vocals.
This is the only album that a guy by the name of Johnny Edwards sings on, which if you weren't paying attention, you'd probably think it was Lou.
I think that's become I didn't like it when I first listened to it, but I like it more and more every time I listen to it. And something that I knew wasn't going to make the list is Michael Jackson Dangerous, which to make it kind of more 1991, Slash actually appears on this album on Give In To Me, which is, we have Eddie playing on the Thriller album. Slash kind of gets overlooked. I didn't even know he actually played on this until last year, maybe.
I didn't know until right now.
Yeah, and those are my only two honorable mentions.
Cool. I've got 3. This is Queen, Innuendo. This came out early 91. This was the last album to come out before Freddie Mercury died. He died that November, same day as Eric Carr of Kiss. This title song is one of my favorites. The Show Must Go On is just an absolute classic. I love I'm Going Slightly Mad. I don't like everything on here. As a matter of fact, it's not quite as good as I would have said it was years ago, but there's still some quality stuff on here. And had to mention that. The next one, Bryan Adams, Waking Up the Neighbors. This came out in like fall of 91. It was preceded by a little song that was on this Robin Hood movie. Maybe you've heard of it. It was like #1 for 9 weeks or something crazy like that. But I'm happy to say that it's, you know, the album as a whole is more of a rock album than that, even though I wasn't into it at the time. When this came out, Bryan Adams hadn't had an album in 4 years. And that was an eternity when you're a young person. So people had kind of forgotten about him. But this was the first time that he worked with a guy by the name of Mutt Lange. And subsequently enough, the first official single to come out when the album actually came out was a song called Can't Stop This Thing We Started, which you'd be forgiven for thinking, hey, is this a new Def Leppard song? The drums sound like Def Leppard, the background vocals, that's Mutt all over the background vocals. Now, the reason this didn't make my top 20 is because I think that this album suffers from the CD age disease of having too many songs on it. There are 15 songs on this album, and it's almost an hour long. And it's just, unfortunately, the quality is just not there all the way through. If they'd have made this, shaved this down to a 10-song album and had Can't Stop This Thing We Started, Thought I Died, Gone to Heaven, Do I Have to Say the Words, There'll Never Be Another Tonight, Is Your Mama Gonna Miss You? I think this would be one of his very, very best albums. But as it stands, it's got enough good stuff on it to be one of my honorables. And the last one is probably the most, well, one of the more obscure ones. This is a group called The Storm. If this looks like Hugh Syme artwork, it's because it is. This came out in 1991. This was also produced by Beau Hill. And this is essentially what happens when you have 3/5 of Journey, but Journey are on hiatus. So this band consisted of a singer named Kevin Chalfant, who sounds an awful lot like Steve Perry, guitar player named Josh Ramos, who sounds a lot like Neil Schon, and then 3 actual Journey alumni, drummer Steve Smith, bass player Ross Valerie, and original Journey vocalist, keyboard player Greg Raleigh. And I first became aware of this band's music when I heard a song on the radio called I've Got a Lot to Learn About Love, which when it first came on, I thought was a new Steve Perry solo song. I thought it was Steve Perry. And then I heard Greg Raleigh come in on the second half of the verse, which they used to do in the late 70s. And I thought, did Journey get back together? But I thought, no, Journey didn't get back together because Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain are still in bad English. So I was very, very confused. And because this was pre-internet times and DJs didn't always backsell the songs to say what they were playing, it was a little while longer before I realized, okay, this is a group called The Storm, and I didn't know who was with the group. So a few years later, I found the CD marked down, and it's like Journey light, and I don't mean light as in lighter music. As a matter of fact, some of the songs, you know, kind of rock pretty hard on here, but consistency and quality-wise, it's not really that good. They essentially wrote one set of lyrics and made 12 songs out of them. But when they're good, they're really, really good. So if you like melodic hard rock that leans towards maybe the Journey, Night Ranger side of things, and if you're a Journey fan and you've never heard this, I would check it out just for the novelty value of having those players on it. So those are my honorable mentions.
Awesome. So everyone, thanks for sticking with us for this long. We're finally at our #1 album.
And I do believe we must be at a consensus, are we?
It's pretty close, actually. So the last time we talked about this band, their debut album, it was they were the overall winner. All 3 of us, I think you, myself, and Andy both voted their album #1. In this case, I voted at #1, Tim voted at #2, Will voted at #3, and Jex also voted this as his #1 album. We're talking about Skid Row's second album, Slave to the Grind. Who wants to talk about Skid Row?
Why am I holding up 2 copies?
I know.
Go ahead, Will, start us off.
Oh, great. No, this album is Skid Row right off of their debut, pretty much. It's great all the way through. Monkey Business is one of the songs that got me into Skid Row when we were going to go see them years ago, which never happened.
Yeah, but you did the next best thing.
Right. 3 years ago, me and Matt actually saw Sebastian Bach in Moncton playing basically the Skid Row songs. But yeah, this album's great. Riot Act, In a Darkened Room is one of the songs that always sticks with me when I think of Skid Row, which might be a little strange. Quicksand Jesus, The Threat, Slave to the Grind, obviously, just a great album from start to finish for sure.
So, I mean, I was way into this band from the first album. They were my favorite band on their first album. I played it to death. And I was so ready for a new album. I was so ready for a new album from them. And I distinctly remember watching the Pepsi Power Hour on Much Music with the late Dan Gallagher, talking to Scotty Hill, Snake Sabo, and Rachel Baldwin about this album. And this one funny part, Matt and I had seen the same interview, even though we didn't meet for another year. And because of that interview, whenever anybody talked about Night Ranger, Matt would laugh because there was just some offhanded quote about the music business in general and how it's important to have original material. And Dan Gallagher said something to the effect of it's important to not play Night Ranger tunes. And I really, he could have said any band there, but it just became a thing. And if anybody knows the show, I love Night Ranger. So anyway, and then they premiered the video for Monkey Business. And the first time hearing that riff, the first time hearing Sebastian's vocals, and when that thing, the 3 cowbell kicks in, it's still one of the most powerful songs. And what a way to start off an album. So I was even more ready to hear the album. And then I bought the cassette single to Monkey Business, which had the title song on the other side, which is the heaviest thing I'd ever heard Skid Row do. It's practically old school thrash. It's really fast. It's a drop D. It's a killer riff. Everything about it is just so cool. So finally getting the album and being able to listen to the whole thing was very exciting. But there's more to it than that. In that Much Music interview, Dan Gallagher mentions that one of the songs on the album was called Get the F Out. And it's the first time to my knowledge that you had an F-bomb in the title of the song printed out in full on the back of an album, and without being, blurred out or crossed out or something like that. And it wasn't, maybe like a less than a year after that, Here Comes Slick Toxic, and they had a song called Big F and Deal, right? So, and then it became No Big Thing. So because of that, some stores, there was concern that some stores wouldn't stock the album. So they put out an alternate version with a song in its place called Beggar's Day. Now, when John and I were partners in crime back then, John's been on the show. He bought the cassette of the uncensored version. And so when it was, then I bought the one I bought. I said, well, I'll get the other one. The other one has a great song on it called Beggar's Day. But no matter how you get this album, just get it. Because, man, Living on a Chain Gang, Creep Show. Creep Show has the best lyric that may have ever been written in a rock song. Matt knows exactly what I'm talking about. Hit me with a shovel because I can't believe that I dug you. that I don't know if Rachel Bolan wrote that. That is poetry. It's a fantastic album. Really cool artwork done by Sebastian's father, David. Would love to have gotten it on vinyl. It's scarce, no matter whether you get an original pressing or whether one of the record store day pressings, of which there were like 6, I think, maybe, because nobody I know got one. Yeah, fantastic album. I can't really add any more to it, but Jax, Matt, somebody?
Something I didn't realize, actually, the cover art for that album, we've talked about David Bierk, Sebastian's dad, did the album artwork. Like, this is the artwork that he came up with. It's based on a painting from the 1600s. I actually printed it out. You'd be hard pressed to figure out that these aren't exactly the same thing. I mean, it's changed a little bit, some of the faces and bodies, but I didn't actually.
I always thought that's supposed to be Sebastian there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it wasn't like an original piece. So,
Okay.
so of course it was the first heavy metal album to debut at #1 on the Billboard Top 200 charts. So that was a pretty big deal. We've talked about the 5 singles, Your Monkey Business, Slave to the Grind. I didn't realize actually, Tim, actually Will mentioned In a Darkened Room. He really likes that song. That was a single in Europe.
Yeah.
Quicksand Jesus was released as a single in Japan.
And Wasted Time was a single as well. There's actually a video for In a Darkened Room. I don't think it was ever officially released, but you can find it on YouTube. They actually shot a video for that. So they did 4 videos altogether. Actually, I think they did 5 because, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but is there not a 3D video for Psycho Love?
Yes, yeah, and you could get with the traditional 3D glasses with the
Everybody
red.
put on your 3D glasses.
Yeah.
But so Skid Row gave us a solid debut in '89, like y'all said. And this one here, with the first one, they were just warming up. Because I consider the first album an appetizer to this delicious dish. Because it's so good, they cranked it up to 11. It's much heavier. I love both those albums, but this one is so much heavier. They still made room, a darkened room, for some ballads. There's 3 ballads on here, but they're so well spread out that it doesn't ruin the flow at all. And I was actually late to this party. I think I discovered it. It was only brought to my attention in like 2015. But as soon as I heard it, I was hooked, and I found a copy shortly after. And luckily, my copy is the uncensored version with the Get the F Out. But I love Beggar's Day. I love both songs. It's a shame they couldn't include it as a bonus track.
Yeah.
I think on the Japanese version it is probably. But they're both good. My buddy Pla actually has this on vinyl, and I think it's an original pressing. It's the one with Beggar's Day, and I'm so jealous. One of my favorite tracks is actually the title track, Sleep the Grind, which was actually inspired by Van Halen. Once again, the song DOA, Sebastian Bach heard it. He was high on cocaine, and he thought to himself, would it be cool to have a version of DOA sped up? So that's essentially what they did. So if you listen to both songs, you can really hear that. Other favorites for me are Living on a Chain Gang and Mudkicker, but a solid album all the way through.
A lot of bands would talk in magazines about how, next album's going to be even heavier. Next album's going to be even heavier. It never was. They're the only band that made good on that. They had a 5 million selling debut album. And most bands in that position, they would have lightened up their sound. They would have maybe added a keyboard player, or they wouldn't have been, that first album would have been the heaviest thing that ever came out of them. But they got heavier on the second album. And I would say, looking ahead, they got even heavier on the one that came after it.
Absolutely.
But I will say this, the Subhuman Race is a story for another time. They didn't forget how to write memorable, catchy songs, even though they were heavy.
Agreed.
There you go. That's 1991, 30 long years ago. As you can see, quite varied. A little bit of everything in terms of rock music, even a little bit of pop music. And, I'm sure there's albums that are on people's favorite lists that we did not talk about at all. So, what do you think they are? These are just our opinions. These are just how they rank. I want to thank Matt for doing the ranking for this. And thanks everybody for sitting through this video. I like doing these year-end, these by the year shows. I think we may have at least one more to do later this year. See how that goes. And thanks everyone for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.